The morning sun cast long shadows across the abandoned streets of Denver as Marcus Rodriguez crouched behind the rusted remains of a delivery truck, his weathered hands gripping a modified crossbow. 3 months had passed since the outbreak began, and the former Marine had learned that silence meant survival in this new world. The undead wandered aimlessly through the intersection ahead, their decomposing forms moving with the jerky, unnatural gait that had become humanity's greatest nightmare. Marcus counted 12 of them, their tattered clothing hanging from skeletal frames as they searched for any sign of life. His radio crackled softly, and he pressed the earpiece closer to hear the whispered voice of his partner, Elena Vasquez, a former CDC researcher who had become invaluable to their small group of survivors. "Marcus, I've got movement on the north side." Elena's voice was barely audible through the static. "Looks like a fresh horde coming in from the highway. We need to move now if we're going to reach the supply depot." Marcus nodded to himself, knowing that their carefully planned scavenging mission was about to become significantly more dangerous. The depot they were targeting had been a government emergency supply station before the collapse, and intelligence from other survivor groups suggested it still contained medical supplies, ammunition, and most importantly, the specialized equipment Elena needed for her research into the zombie virus. She believed she was close to understanding how the infection spread and potentially how to create a more effective defense against it. The sound of shuffling feet grew louder as Marcus spotted the approaching horde Elena had warned him about. These weren't the slow, deteriorated zombies they usually encountered. These were fresh converts, people who had been infected within the last few days, and they moved with frightening speed and coordination. Marcus had seen what happened when fresh zombies caught scent of living humans, and the memory of watching an entire family torn apart in seconds still haunted his dreams. He pressed his back against the truck and slowly made his way toward the building where Elena was positioned, careful to avoid the broken glass and debris that littered the street. Elena watched through her binoculars as the fresh horde approached, her scientific mind automatically cataloging their behavior patterns even as fear coursed through her veins. She had noticed that newer zombies seemed to retain some muscle memory and problem-solving abilities, making them far more dangerous than their decomposed counterparts. Through her research, she had discovered that the virus affected the brain in stages, first shutting down higher cognitive functions while leaving basic motor skills and predatory instincts intact. The fresher the zombie, the more of their human capabilities remained, which explained why some could open doors, climb obstacles, and even use simple tools. As Marcus reached the building's entrance, a piece of metal debris shifted under his boot, creating a sharp clang that echoed through the empty street. Every zombie head in the vicinity snapped toward the sound with mechanical precision, their milky eyes focusing on his location with terrifying accuracy. Marcus froze, knowing that any sudden movement would trigger a feeding frenzy that would bring every undead creature within a mile radius converging on their position. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, broken only by the distant moaning of the approaching horde and the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Elena quickly assessed their options from her elevated position. The supply depot was still 2 blocks away, but the street between them and their destination was now crawling with zombies. She had been working on a theory about zombie behavior patterns, specifically how they communicated with each other through low-frequency sounds that humans couldn't hear. Her observations suggested that zombies operated with a form of hive intelligence, sharing information about prey locations across significant distances. If her theory was correct, the noise Marcus had made would soon attract every zombie in the area, turning their carefully planned mission into a desperate fight for survival. The first zombie to investigate the sound was a former construction worker, still wearing a hard hat and reflective vest. Its movements were deliberate and purposeful as it approached Marcus's hiding spot, suggesting it had been infected recently. Marcus could see the intelligence still flickering behind its dead eyes, a remnant of the human it had once been. This was what made the fresh zombies so terrifying. They retained enough human cunning to set traps, coordinate attacks, and adapt to survivor tactics. The creature paused at the truck where Marcus had been hiding, its head tilting as it processed the lingering scent of living human. Elena knew they had perhaps 30 seconds before the situation became completely untenable. She had been developing a distraction technique based on her understanding of zombie sensory perception, using a combination of sound and scent to redirect their attention. Reaching into her pack, she pulled out a small device she had constructed from salvaged electronics and medical supplies. The device could emit high-frequency sounds that seemed to confuse zombie navigation systems, though she had only tested it on small groups. Using it now would be a significant gamble, but their alternatives were rapidly disappearing as more zombies began converging on their location. Marcus watched as the construction worker zombie began following his scent trail, its movements becoming more agitated as it detected the fresh human presence. Behind it, the rest of the local zombie population was beginning to take notice, their heads turning toward the disturbance like a pack of predators sensing wounded prey. The approaching horde from the highway was now visible in the distance, a writhing mass of undead humanity that would soon flood the entire area. Marcus realized that their mission had just transformed from a supply run into a test of every survival strategy they had developed over the past 3 months of living in this nightmare world. The construction worker zombie's head snapped up as Elena activated her experimental device, a piercing whine cutting through the air that seemed to disorient the creature momentarily. Marcus seized the opportunity, rolling from behind the truck and sprinting toward the building where Elena waited, his boots pounding against the cracked asphalt. The device worked better than Elena had hoped, causing the nearby zombies to stumble and lose coordination as the high-frequency sound disrupted whatever neural pathways still functioned in their deteriorated brains. However, the effect was temporary, and she could already see some of the fresher zombies beginning to adapt, shaking their heads violently as if trying to clear the interference. "Move, move, move!" Elena whispered urgently into her radio as she watched Marcus weave between the confused zombies. She had positioned herself on the second floor of an old office building, giving her a clear view of the street and multiple escape routes they had mapped out during their reconnaissance. The approaching highway horde was now less than 4 blocks away, and she could see that it was larger than they had initially estimated. Through her binoculars, she counted at least 50 zombies, including several that appeared to be leading the group with purposeful, coordinated movements that suggested a level of organization that challenged everything the scientific community had believed about the undead. Marcus burst through the building's entrance just as the construction worker zombie regained its bearings and let out a bone-chilling howl that served as a rallying cry for every undead creature in the vicinity. The sound was unlike anything Marcus had heard before, a combination of human vocal cords and something far more primal and terrifying. Within seconds, answering calls echoed from multiple directions, creating a symphony of death that made his blood run cold. Elena's research had suggested that zombies could communicate, but hearing it firsthand was a stark reminder of how much they still didn't understand about their enemy. Elena met Marcus at the stairwell, her face pale but determined as she quickly packed her equipment. "The device bought us maybe 2 minutes," she said, slinging her backpack over her shoulders. "But I think we just confirmed my theory about their communication network. That howl wasn't random, it was a coordinated signal." Marcus nodded grimly, checking his crossbow and the spare bolts in his quiver. They had learned early in the outbreak that firearms attracted too much attention, making silent weapons essential for survival. The crossbow had served him well, but he knew that if they encountered the full highway horde, even perfect accuracy wouldn't be enough to save them. The building shook slightly as the first wave of zombies reached the entrance below, their fists pounding against the reinforced door that Marcus had barricaded behind him. Elena led the way to the roof access, where they had prepared an emergency escape route using a zip line to the adjacent building. The line was makeshift, constructed from climbing rope and hardware store pulleys, but it had tested successfully during their planning phase. As they climbed the stairs, the sounds of breaking glass and splintering wood echoed from below, indicating that the zombies were finding alternative ways into the building with disturbing efficiency. On the roof, Marcus quickly secured the zip line while Elena scanned the street below through her binoculars. The highway horde had arrived and was spreading through the area like a plague, moving with coordinated precision that defied conventional understanding of zombie behavior. She noticed that certain zombies seemed to be directing others, pointing toward buildings and organizing search patterns that suggested retained tactical thinking. "Marcus, look at this," she called softly, handing him the binoculars. "They're not just wandering randomly. Someone or something is coordinating their movements." Marcus studied the scene below and felt his stomach drop. Among the horde, he could see zombies that were clearly former military personnel, still wearing fragments of combat gear and moving with disciplined formation tactics. One figure in particular caught his attention, a zombie in the tattered remains of an officer's uniform who seemed to be directing the others with hand signals that Marcus recognized from his own military training. The implications were terrifying. If zombies could retain and utilize military knowledge, then every assumption about their capabilities needed to be reconsidered. The door to the roof access burst open behind them as the first zombies reached their level, moving faster than either survivor had expected. Elena clipped herself to the zip line without hesitation, knowing that hesitation meant death in their world. As she pushed off from the roof, Marcus provided cover with his crossbow, each bolt finding its mark in zombie skulls with practiced precision. The undead creatures showed no fear or self-preservation instincts, continuing to pour through the doorway even as their companions fell around them. Elena landed hard on the adjacent rooftop, immediately turning to secure the landing area for Marcus. Below them, the street was now completely overrun with zombies, their upturned faces tracking the survivors' movement across the skyline. The supply depot was still visible in the distance, but reaching it would require crossing several more buildings and navigating through what had become a zombie-controlled territory. Elena's mind raced as she calculated their options, knowing that their original plan was no longer viable, and that they needed to adapt quickly to survive. Marcus prepared to follow Elena across the zip line when he noticed something that made him pause. The military zombie officer was looking directly up at him, its dead eyes showing a flicker of recognition and intelligence that sent chills down his spine. The creature raised its arm and pointed at Marcus's position, then made a series of hand signals to the other zombies below. Within moments, the entire horde began moving toward the building Elena had landed on, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Marcus realized with growing horror that they weren't just being hunted by mindless undead, they were being tactically pursued by an enemy that could think, plan, and adapt to their strategies. Marcus launched himself across the zip line as the military zombie officer below began organizing the horde into what appeared to be a systematic building-by-building search pattern. The rope burned against his gloves as he descended toward Elena's position, but the pain was nothing compared to the terror of watching zombies demonstrate tactical coordination that rivaled human military units. Elena helped him land safely on the rooftop, but her expression was grim as she pointed toward the street below where zombies were already entering the ground floor of their new building. The undead weren't simply following their scent anymore, they were anticipating their movements and cutting off escape routes with strategic precision. "We need to reach Dr. James Patterson at the university," Elena said urgently, referring to her former colleague who had been working on zombie behavior research from a fortified laboratory across the city. "If these things are retaining military training and tactical knowledge, then everything we thought we knew about the infection is wrong." Marcus nodded, understanding the implications. Patterson had been studying zombie neural activity and might have insights into why some zombies retained more cognitive function than others. However, the university was 8 miles away through territory that was now clearly under zombie control, making their journey exponentially more dangerous. The building beneath them shuddered as zombies began systematically breaking down doors and barriers on each floor, working their way upward with methodical efficiency. Elena had noticed that the military zombies seemed to be directing different groups to specific tasks. Some were securing the perimeter while others conducted the floor-by-floor search. This level of organization suggested that the zombie virus didn't simply destroy the brain, but rather rewired it, potentially preserving certain skill sets while eliminating others like empathy and self-preservation. Marcus studied their surroundings, identifying potential routes across the urban landscape that might avoid the main zombie concentrations. The city's rooftop infrastructure offered possibilities: maintenance ladders, fire escapes, and building-to-building connections that could keep them above street level where the bulk of the horde operated. However, he had also observed that some zombies retained enough motor skills to climb, meaning that elevation alone wouldn't guarantee safety. They needed to move quickly and unpredictably, using the zombies' apparent tactical thinking against them by being more chaotic and irrational than their pursuers expected. Elena pulled out a hand-drawn map of the city that their survivor group had been updating with zombie movement patterns and safe zones. Several routes to the university were already marked as compromised, but there was a path through the old industrial district that might still be viable. The area was filled with abandoned factories and warehouses that could provide cover and multiple escape options if they encountered resistance. More importantly, the industrial zone had fewer residential areas, which meant potentially fewer zombies since most of the initial outbreak had occurred in populated neighborhoods. The sound of splintering wood from the stairwell below indicated that the zombies had reached the upper floors faster than anticipated. Marcus and Elena moved to the building's edge, where a narrow gap separated them from the next rooftop. The jump was manageable but risky, especially with their heavy packs and the knowledge that a fall would mean certain death among the zombies below. Elena went first, her smaller frame making the leap with relative ease, while Marcus followed with a running start that carried him safely across the gap just as the first zombies burst through the roof access door behind him. As they moved across the rooftops, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded rather than simply pursued. The zombie movements below seemed designed to push them in a specific direction, toward areas where other undead groups were positioned to intercept them. Her scientific training told her that this level of coordination required some form of communication network that extended beyond the simple howls and moans they had previously observed. If zombies could share tactical information across distances, then isolated survivor groups were at an even greater disadvantage than anyone had realized. Marcus noticed that the military zombie officer had disappeared from view, which worried him more than seeing it directing the horde. In his combat experience, losing sight of enemy leadership usually meant they were planning something unexpected. He scanned the surrounding buildings and streets, looking for signs of zombie movement that might indicate an ambush or flanking maneuver. The absence of visible zombies in certain areas was actually more concerning than their presence, suggesting that the undead were learning to use concealment and misdirection as tactical advantages. The industrial district loomed ahead, its towering smokestacks and maze of buildings offering both opportunity and danger. Elena knew that reaching Dr. Patterson was crucial not just for their own survival but for the future of humanity's fight against the zombie plague. If her theories about zombie intelligence and organization were correct, then traditional survival strategies would become increasingly ineffective as the undead adapted to human tactics. They needed to understand the enemy's capabilities and limitations before the zombies evolved beyond humanity's ability to combat them. As they prepared to descend into the industrial zone, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement on a distant rooftop. The military zombie officer, now accompanied by several other zombies that appeared to be former law enforcement and emergency responders. The group was moving parallel to their route, maintaining visual contact while staying out of crossbow range. Marcus realized with growing dread that they weren't just being hunted by individual zombies anymore. They were facing an organized enemy force that was learning from each encounter and adapting its strategies accordingly. The war between the living and the dead had just evolved into something far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. The descent into the industrial district proved more treacherous than either survivor had anticipated, as Elena discovered fresh zombie tracks in the dust and debris that suggested recent organized patrols through the area. The footprints weren't random wandering patterns but deliberate formations that indicated the undead were conducting systematic sweeps of potential hiding places. Marcus examined the tracks with his military training, recognizing search patterns that mirrored techniques he had learned for urban warfare operations. The zombies weren't just occupying territory anymore, they were actively securing it against human infiltration with professional-level tactical awareness. Elena's radio crackled with static before a weak signal broke through, carrying the voice of Tommy Chin, a former electronics engineer who served as their group's communications specialist from their base camp 15 miles outside the city. Marcus, Elena, we're picking up some kind of coordinated radio chatter on multiple frequencies. Tommy's voice was strained with concern. It's not human, but it's definitely structured communication. Whatever's happening in the city, it's bigger than just your local area. The implications sent chills through both survivors as they realized the zombie coordination might extend far beyond what they had witnessed, potentially encompassing regional or even national networks of undead intelligence. Moving through the abandoned factory complex, Marcus and Elena encountered evidence of recent zombie occupation that defied everything they thought they knew about undead behavior. Tools had been arranged in organized patterns, machinery had been deliberately repositioned to create defensive barriers, and most disturbing of all, they found crude but effective traps that had clearly been constructed by zombie hands. Elena documented everything with her camera, knowing that this evidence would be crucial for Dr. Patterson's research and for warning other survivor communities about the evolving threat they faced. The sound of mechanical grinding echoed through the factory as Elena realized that some of the machinery was actually running, powered by generators that zombies had somehow managed to operate. Through a grimy window, she watched in horror as zombies worked together to move heavy equipment, their movements coordinated and purposeful rather than the mindless shambling that had characterized early outbreak reports. One zombie, wearing the remnants of a factory supervisor's uniform, seemed to be directing the others with gestures and positioning that suggested retained knowledge of industrial operations. Marcus positioned himself as a lookout while Elena attempted to contact Dr. Patterson using a secure frequency they had established weeks earlier. The university was still several miles away, but Patterson's laboratory had powerful communication equipment that could reach across the city when atmospheric conditions were favorable. After several attempts, Patterson's voice came through clearly, though his words carried an urgency that made both survivors' hearts race. "Elena, thank God you're alive. I've been monitoring zombie behavior patterns across the city, and what you're seeing isn't isolated. They're building something." Dr. Patterson's revelation that zombies were engaged in construction activities across multiple locations sent shockwaves through Elena's understanding of the infection's effects on human cognition. According to Patterson's observations, zombies were not only retaining specific skill sets but were also demonstrating the ability to plan and execute complex projects that required sustained cooperation over extended periods. His laboratory surveillance equipment had captured footage of zombies constructing barriers, establishing supply routes, and even maintaining equipment with a level of competence that suggested the virus preserved far more cognitive function than anyone had previously believed possible. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps that moved with military precision through the factory corridors. Marcus signaled for silence as he identified at least 6 distinct sets of footfalls, all moving in formation toward their position. Through gaps in the machinery, he caught glimpses of the zombies that were hunting them, former soldiers, police officers, and security personnel who retained enough training to conduct professional-level search and clearance operations. Their movements were coordinated through subtle hand signals and positioning that demonstrated preserved tactical knowledge and the ability to adapt their strategies based on environmental factors. Elena quickly gathered her equipment as Marcus identified an escape route through the factory's ventilation system that would allow them to avoid direct confrontation with the zombie patrol. However, as they prepared to move, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the zombies was carrying what appeared to be a functioning radio, and she could hear garbled transmissions coming from the device. The zombie was not only using technology but was actively communicating with other undead units, coordinating their search efforts with a level of sophistication that transformed the entire nature of the threat they faced. As they crawled through the ventilation ducts, Elena's mind raced with the implications of what they had discovered. If zombies could use technology, communicate over distances, and retain professional skills, then humanity's survival strategies needed to be completely reconsidered. The undead weren't just a plague of mindless monsters anymore. They were becoming an organized enemy force with the potential to outmaneuver and outthink human survivors. The race to reach Dr. Patterson had become more than a mission for supplies and information. It was now a desperate attempt to understand an enemy that was evolving faster than anyone had imagined possible. Marcus led the way through the ductwork, following building schematics he had memorized during their planning phase, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The zombie patrol's movements had been too precise, too anticipatory, as if they knew exactly where the survivors would try to hide. As they approached an exit point that would put them back on street level, Marcus realized with growing dread that the zombies weren't just hunting them randomly. They were being systematically driven toward a specific location where something far worse than a simple patrol might be waiting for them. The ventilation shaft ended at a loading dock that overlooked the city's main industrial thoroughfare, where Elena and Marcus discovered a sight that defied every assumption about zombie capabilities and intentions. Hundreds of undead figures moved through the area with coordinated purpose, constructing what appeared to be a massive fortification using salvaged materials, abandoned vehicles, and industrial equipment. The structure wasn't random or instinctive, it was a deliberate defensive position with clear sight lines, multiple levels, and strategic choke points that demonstrated advanced understanding of military engineering principles. Elena watched through her binoculars as zombie work crews operated heavy machinery with disturbing competence, while others stood guard in organized formations that provided overlapping fields of observation and defense. The military zombie officer they had encountered earlier was clearly visible, directing construction efforts and positioning guards with the efficiency of a seasoned commander. Most terrifying of all, Elena could see that the fortification was designed not just to keep humans out, but to serve as a staging area for coordinated attacks against survivor settlements throughout the region. Dr. Patterson's voice crackled through Elena's radio with increasing urgency as he shared real-time intelligence from his laboratory's monitoring systems. "Elena, you need to see what I'm seeing here. Satellite imagery shows similar construction projects in at least 12 major cities across the country. The zombies aren't just building random structures. They're creating a network of fortified positions that could support large-scale military operations." The revelation that zombie organization extended to a national level transformed their local survival mission into something with implications for the entire human species. Marcus identified several zombie sentries positioned along their intended route to the university, each one equipped with what appeared to be functional communication equipment, and positioned to provide early warning of human movement through the area. The sentries weren't the shambling, mindless creatures from early outbreak reports. They were alert, disciplined, and clearly following established protocols for perimeter security. Their positioning demonstrated understanding of tactical principles that Marcus had learned in advanced military training, suggesting that zombie retention of human knowledge extended to sophisticated combat doctrines. The loading dock provided temporary concealment, but Elena knew they couldn't remain hidden indefinitely as zombie patrols systematically searched every building in the industrial complex. She studied the fortification below, noting that its design incorporated elements from multiple military traditions, American defensive positions, European fortress architecture, and even ancient siege warfare principles that suggested the zombies were drawing from collective human knowledge spanning centuries of conflict. The implications were staggering. If zombies could access and utilize the entire breadth of human military history, then conventional resistance strategies would be woefully inadequate. Tommy's voice broke through the radio static with information that made their situation even more desperate. "Marcus, Elena, we're getting reports from survivor groups across the state. Zombie forces are moving in coordinated formations toward major population centers, and they're using captured human equipment including vehicles, weapons, and communication systems." The news confirmed Elena's worst fears about zombie adaptation and suggested that their small group's survival depended on reaching Dr. Patterson before the undead completed whatever large-scale operation they were planning. As they prepared to leave the loading dock, Marcus noticed movement on the fortification that made him grab Elena's arm in alarm. A group of zombies was unloading what appeared to be human prisoners from a military transport vehicle, leading them into the structure with organized efficiency that suggested the undead were not only capturing survivors but keeping them alive for unknown purposes. The sight challenged every assumption about zombie behavior and raised terrifying questions about what the undead might want with living humans beyond simple consumption. Elena's scientific mind reeled as she observed zombie guards maintaining discipline and following clear protocols for prisoner handling, behavior that required not only retained knowledge but active decision-making and long-term planning capabilities. Through her binoculars, she could see that some of the zombie guards were former correctional officers and military police, their retained expertise being utilized to manage human captives with professional competence. The realization that zombies were taking prisoners rather than simply killing all humans they encountered suggested a level of strategic thinking that transformed the entire nature of the conflict. Dr. Patterson's laboratory was now less than 2 miles away, but the route required crossing directly through zombie-controlled territory where organized patrols and fixed defensive positions made detection almost inevitable. Marcus studied the zombie fortifications' layout, identifying potential weaknesses in their security perimeter that might allow for infiltration, but he also recognized that the undead had positioned their defenses to funnel any attacking force into predetermined kill zones. The zombies weren't just building random barriers. They were creating sophisticated defensive networks that demonstrated mastery of military engineering principles. The sound of approaching helicopters drew their attention skyward, where Elena spotted military aircraft conducting reconnaissance flights over the zombie fortification. However, her relief at seeing signs of organized human resistance quickly turned to horror as she watched the helicopters maintain safe distances and avoid engagement with the zombie forces below. Through her radio, she heard fragmentary transmissions suggesting that military commanders were treating the zombie fortifications as legitimate enemy installations rather than simple outbreak containment zones, indicating that the conflict had evolved beyond a public health crisis into actual warfare between organized human and zombie forces. As darkness began to fall across the industrial district, Marcus realized that their window for reaching Dr. Patterson was rapidly closing. The zombie fortification was becoming more active as night approached, with increased patrols and what appeared to be preparation for nighttime operations that could threaten survivor communities throughout the region. Elena packed her equipment with grim determination, knowing that the intelligence they had gathered about zombie organization and capabilities was crucial for human survival, but also understanding that their mission had transformed from a simple supply run into a desperate race to warn humanity about an enemy that was far more dangerous and sophisticated than anyone had imagined possible. The approach to Dr. Patterson's university laboratory required navigating through what had once been the campus quad, now transformed into a zombie-controlled staging area where undead figures moved with military precision between hastily constructed command posts and supply depots. Elena counted at least 30 zombies organized into distinct units, each group focused on specific tasks that ranged from perimeter security to what appeared to be intelligence-gathering operations using salvaged electronic equipment. The sight of zombies operating computers and communication devices with retained technical knowledge shattered any remaining illusions about the infection's impact on cognitive function. Marcus identified a maintenance tunnel system that ran beneath the campus, originally designed for utility access but now offering their only viable approach to Patterson's fortified laboratory without direct confrontation with zombie forces. The tunnels were cramped and poorly lit, but they provided concealment from the increasingly sophisticated surveillance network that the zombies had established using security cameras and motion sensors throughout the campus grounds. As they crawled through the underground passages, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were moving through territory that the zombies had deliberately left unguarded, as if their route was being anticipated and controlled. Dr. Patterson's laboratory occupied the basement levels of the university's medical research building, protected by reinforced barriers and electronic security systems that had been upgraded significantly since the outbreak began. When Elena and Marcus finally reached the facility, they found Patterson working frantically with a team of 3 other survivors, including Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a neurologist who had been studying brain tissue samples from captured zombies. The laboratory was filled with sophisticated equipment that Patterson had salvaged from across the campus, creating a research facility capable of advanced analysis of the zombie virus and its effects on human neural pathways. Patterson's initial briefing confirmed Elena's worst fears about the scope and sophistication of zombie organization, as his team had documented evidence of undead coordination extending across multiple states and involving hundreds of thousands of infected individuals. Through intercepted communications and surveillance footage, they had identified what appeared to be a zombie command structure with clear hierarchies, specialized roles, and strategic objectives that included the systematic capture of human survivors and the establishment of territorial control over major population centers. The zombies weren't just surviving the apocalypse, they were actively working to dominate it. Dr. Martinez presented her neurological findings with clinical precision that made the implications even more terrifying than Elena had imagined. The zombie virus didn't simply destroy brain tissue but rather rewired neural pathways to preserve specific cognitive functions while eliminating others, creating undead individuals who retained professional skills, tactical knowledge, and problem-solving abilities while losing empathy, fear, and self-preservation instincts. The result was an enemy force that combined human intelligence with absolute ruthlessness and complete dedication to whatever objectives their rewired brains prioritized. The laboratory's monitoring equipment detected increased zombie activity throughout the city as night fell, with coordinated movements suggesting preparation for a large-scale operation that could threaten every survivor community in the region. Patterson showed Elena and Marcus real-time satellite imagery revealing zombie forces moving in formation toward known survivor settlements, their movements coordinated through communication networks that demonstrated planning and logistics capabilities rivaling those of professional military organizations. The undead weren't just randomly attacking anymore, they were conducting systematic campaigns designed to eliminate human resistance. Elena's radio crackled with desperate transmissions from Tommy and their base camp, reporting that zombie forces were approaching their position in organized formations that included captured military vehicles and equipment. The attack wasn't random or opportunistic, it was a coordinated assault designed to eliminate their group's communication capabilities and strategic resources. Patterson immediately began uploading critical research data to secure servers while his team prepared emergency evacuation protocols, knowing that their laboratory's location had likely been compromised by zombie intelligence gathering operations. Marcus studied the laboratory's defensive preparations and realized that Patterson's team had been planning for exactly this scenario, with multiple escape routes, cache supplies, and contingency communication systems that could maintain research operations even if the primary facility was overrun. However, the approaching zombie forces included former military engineers and demolitions experts who retained enough knowledge to systematically destroy fortified positions, making traditional defensive strategies increasingly ineffective against an enemy that understood human tactics and could adapt accordingly. Dr. Martinez revealed the most disturbing aspect of her research as she explained that zombie neuro rewiring appeared to be progressive, with infected individuals becoming more intelligent and capable over time rather than deteriorating like traditional undead creatures. The zombies they were facing now were significantly more dangerous than those from the early outbreak, and the trend suggested that zombie capabilities would continue to evolve in ways that could eventually surpass human cognitive abilities. The infection wasn't just creating mindless monsters, it was potentially creating a superior species that viewed humanity as an obstacle to be eliminated. Patterson's final revelation sent shockwaves through the group as he shared intelligence suggesting that zombie forces were actively seeking to capture specific individuals with scientific, military, or technical expertise, apparently recognizing the value of human knowledge and skills for their own operations. The prisoners Elena had observed at the industrial fortification weren't random captives. They were carefully selected targets whose expertise could enhance zombie capabilities and accelerate their evolution into an even more formidable enemy. The realization that zombies were not only organized but were actively recruiting human knowledge transformed the conflict from a survival scenario into a race for the future of human civilization itself. As alarms began sounding throughout the laboratory indicating approaching zombie forces, Elena understood that their mission had evolved far beyond gathering supplies or conducting research. They were now carrying information that could determine whether humanity survived as the dominant species on Earth or became extinct at the hands of an enemy that had learned to think, plan, and wage war with capabilities that might soon exceed their own. The battle for survival was about to become a battle for the very future of human existence. The laboratory's emergency evacuation began as Patterson's surveillance systems detected zombie forces surrounding the university campus in a coordinated encirclement that demonstrated tactical sophistication beyond anything they had previously encountered. Elena watched the monitors in horror as zombie units moved with precision timing, cutting off escape routes and establishing overlapping fields of fire that would make any attempt to flee the building a deadly proposition. The undead weren't just attacking randomly. They were executing a textbook military operation designed to capture the facility and its occupants intact. Dr. Martinez frantically downloaded her neurological research onto portable drives while explaining that her latest findings revealed zombie brain evolution was accelerating at an exponential rate, with newer infections showing cognitive capabilities that surpassed baseline human intelligence in specific areas like pattern recognition, tactical analysis, and collective problem solving. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just fighting an organized enemy, but one that was becoming smarter and more capable with each passing day. The zombie virus wasn't creating mindless undead, it was engineering a superior species designed to replace humanity entirely. Marcus coordinated the laboratory's defensive preparations while maintaining radio contact with Tommy, whose increasingly desperate transmissions painted a picture of coordinated zombie attacks occurring simultaneously across multiple survivor settlements throughout the region. The attacks weren't random raids but carefully planned operations designed to eliminate human resistance networks and capture key personnel whose skills could benefit zombie operations. Tommy reported that their base camp was under siege by zombie forces using captured military equipment and tactics that suggested former special operations personnel were leading the assault. Patterson revealed the most crucial discovery as he prepared to destroy sensitive research data that couldn't be allowed to fall into zombie hands. The undead had been systematically infiltrating human communication networks, intercepting transmissions, and gathering intelligence about survivor locations, capabilities, and plans. The zombies weren't just reacting to human activities, they had been actively monitoring and studying their enemies, learning human tactics and developing countermeasures that explained their recent tactical superiority. Every radio transmission, every planned operation, every supposed secret had potentially been compromised for weeks or even months. Elena's scientific training helped her process the terrifying reality that zombie intelligence gathering extended beyond simple eavesdropping to active psychological warfare designed to demoralize and fragment human resistance. The coordinated attacks on survivor settlements weren't just military operations, they were calculated to destroy human morale and force survivors into increasingly desperate situations where capture or conversion became inevitable. The zombies understood that defeating humanity required more than just superior numbers or tactical skills, it required breaking the human spirit and will to resist. The laboratory's reinforced barriers began showing signs of stress as zombie forces outside employed captured construction equipment and explosives to systematically breach the facility's defenses. Marcus could hear the methodical approach of zombie engineers who retained enough technical knowledge to identify structural weaknesses and exploit them with professional competence. The sounds weren't random destruction but deliberate demolition work designed to create controlled entry points while preserving the laboratory's valuable equipment and research materials for zombie use. Dr. Martinez made a desperate decision to inject herself with an experimental compound she had developed based on her zombie virus research, hoping to create temporary immunity that might allow her to escape and continue her work elsewhere. The injection was untested and potentially lethal, but her research suggested it might disrupt the virus's neuro-rewiring process long enough to provide protection against infection. Elena watched in horror as Martinez convulsed from the experimental treatment, knowing that they were witnessing either a breakthrough in zombie virus defense or the death of one of humanity's most valuable researchers. Patterson's final transmission to survivor networks worldwide carried a warning that transformed the global understanding of the zombie threat. The undead weren't just an infection or plague, but represented an evolutionary leap that was systematically replacing humanity with a species better adapted for survival in the post-apocalyptic world. The zombie virus preserved and enhanced specific human capabilities while eliminating weaknesses like emotion, fear, and individual self-interest that limited human effectiveness in crisis situations. Humanity wasn't fighting monsters, they were fighting their own evolutionary successors. As zombie forces breached the laboratory's outer defenses, Elena realized that escape was no longer possible and that their only remaining option was to ensure that critical research data reached other survivor communities before the facility was completely overrun. She activated Patterson's emergency broadcast system, transmitting everything they had learned about zombie intelligence, organization, and capabilities to every functioning radio receiver within range. The transmission would alert zombie forces to their location, but it might also provide other survivors with the knowledge needed to adapt their strategies and continue human resistance. Marcus prepared for a final defensive stand as zombie soldiers entered the laboratory with tactical precision that demonstrated retained military training and equipment proficiency. However, instead of the mindless assault he expected, the zombies moved with careful deliberation to secure the facility and its occupants without unnecessary destruction. Elena watched in growing horror as she realized the zombies weren't trying to kill them. They were conducting a capture operation designed to preserve the laboratory's research capabilities and recruit its personnel for zombie scientific operations. The lead zombie, wearing the remnants of a military officer's uniform, approached Patterson's position with movements that suggested retained human communication abilities. When it spoke, its voice was distorted but clearly articulate, delivering an ultimatum that chilled Elena to her core: surrender and contribute their expertise to zombie research operations, or watch as every human settlement in the region was systematically destroyed. The zombie wasn't just threatening them, it was negotiating, demonstrating cognitive abilities that included complex reasoning, strategic thinking, and understanding of human psychology that made resistance seem increasingly futile against an enemy that had learned to think like humans while abandoning human limitations. The zombie officer's ultimatum hung in the air as Elena realized that humanity's greatest fear had been realized. The undead had evolved beyond simple predators into a species capable of complex negotiation, strategic thinking, and long-term planning that potentially surpassed human capabilities. Dr. Martinez, still recovering from her experimental injection, managed to stand and face the zombie commander with defiant determination, her scientific mind racing to process the implications of undead creatures that could engage in diplomatic discourse while maintaining absolute tactical superiority over their human adversaries. Patterson made a calculated decision that would determine the fate of human resistance efforts, activating a hidden protocol that simultaneously transmitted all their research data to secure servers worldwide while triggering a controlled demolition sequence designed to destroy the laboratory's most sensitive equipment. The zombie commander reacted with surprising restraint, ordering its forces to secure the surviving humans rather than preventing the destruction, suggesting that zombie strategic priorities focused on preserving human expertise rather than capturing specific technologies or research materials. Elena's radio crackled with Tommy's final transmission as their base camp fell to coordinated zombie assault forces, but his message carried unexpected hope. Survivor communities across the globe were receiving Patterson's research data and beginning to implement new defensive strategies based on understanding zombie cognitive capabilities and organizational structures. The information was spreading faster than zombie forces could contain it, creating a network of human resistance that understood their enemies' strengths and limitations for the first time since the outbreak began. Marcus observed the zombie soldiers with professional interest, noting that their tactical movements demonstrated not just retained military training but active adaptation and improvement of human combat doctrines. The undead had eliminated human weaknesses like fear, hesitation, and self-preservation while retaining strategic thinking and technical skills, creating warriors that were potentially superior to their human counterparts in every measurable way. However, he also noticed subtle behavioral patterns that suggested zombie cognitive rewiring might have created exploitable limitations in creativity and adaptability. Dr. Martinez's experimental injection began showing unexpected effects as she demonstrated apparent immunity to zombie infection attempts, her modified neurochemistry resisting the virus's rewiring process while maintaining full human cognitive function. The zombie commander showed intense interest in her condition, recognizing that her research might hold the key to either enhancing zombie evolution or providing humans with effective defense against the infection. Martinez realized that she had become the most valuable person in the room, potentially holding the future of both species in her modified brain chemistry. The laboratory's destruction sequence activated as Patterson made his final sacrifice, ensuring that critical research equipment couldn't be captured and used to accelerate zombie evolution, while simultaneously creating a distraction that might allow his team to escape. The zombie commander's reaction was swift and decisive, ordering immediate evacuation of all personnel while demonstrating concern for human safety that suggested zombie strategic thinking included long-term planning that required preserving human expertise and knowledge. Elena found herself face to face with the zombie commander as evacuation procedures began, and she was shocked to recognize fragments of human personality and memory still functioning within the creature's rewired consciousness. The zombie spoke her name and referenced specific details from her research, indicating that undead cognitive abilities included not just retained knowledge but active learning and information processing that allowed them to understand and anticipate human behavior with frightening accuracy. As they were escorted from the collapsing laboratory, Marcus noticed that zombie forces were conducting their operations with a level of coordination and efficiency that suggested communication networks extending far beyond local tactical units. The undead weren't just organized locally, they were operating as part of a global network that could coordinate activities across continents and adapt strategies based on real-time intelligence gathering from multiple sources simultaneously. Dr. Martinez's condition continued to evolve as her experimental treatment created unexpected interactions with her neurochemistry, potentially providing insights into zombie virus mechanisms that could lead to either enhanced human resistance or accelerated undead evolution. The zombie commander recognized her value and assigned specialized guards to ensure her safety, demonstrating strategic thinking that prioritized long-term scientific advancement over immediate tactical advantages. The final revelation came as Elena realized that the zombie apocalypse wasn't an ending but a transformation. Humanity wasn't being destroyed but was being forcibly evolved into something that retained human knowledge and capabilities while eliminating the emotional and psychological limitations that had constrained human potential. The zombies weren't humanity's enemies but rather represented what humans might become if they abandoned fear, selfishness, and individual survival instincts in favor of collective intelligence and absolute dedication to species survival. As dawn broke over the devastated city, Elena understood that the war between humans and zombies was really a conflict between two versions of humanity, one clinging to individual consciousness and emotional complexity, the other embracing collective intelligence and ruthless efficiency. The outcome would determine not just which species survived, but what it meant to be human in a world where evolution had been accelerated by viral intervention and the definition of consciousness itself was being rewritten by forces beyond human control. The ultimate survival strategy wasn't about outsmarting the undead horde, it was about deciding whether humanity's future lay in preserving their original nature or accepting transformation into something entirely new.